Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hey Woo Crew! Before we drop into today's episode, I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're doing. I'm wondering if you are taking enough time for you these days, or if perhaps you feel a little overwhelmed and maybe borderline exhausted with all of the to-dos in your day-to-day life. If this is the case, I have created a resource just for you in order to help you get the rest your body is craving. And because we're all about the woo and witchcraft here, it is a fun one. I have a quiz called Which Witch Are You? And so not only will you find out which type of witch you are, or which witch you would be if you were a witch, if you don't identify that way, but you also find out what type of rest your body craves based on which witch you are. The link will be below in the show notes, and I would love if you would share with me which witch you are once you find out. Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I am joined today by Monica. Monica is a certified life purpose coach, a full-time world traveler, adventure junkie, and a total foodie. We have that in common. Using her passion and knowledge of neuroscience, Monica is on a mission to help people live more intentionally and have more fun in the process. I am so excited to chat with you today because I think there's a lot of overlap in our interests and our approach to coaching. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's lovely to be connected to so many people all over the world. Most of my listeners are up here in Canada. Monica's coming to us from Colorado. So similar, probably the same time zone, actually, aren't we? Mountain Standard?
Yeah, I think so, Mountain.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You're just south of us a little bit. And I know that you love to work with people through the lens of science, like neuroscience, but also that kind of more spiritual side of intuition and leaning into that aspect of life. So as I mentioned before we dropped into record, I love starting these conversations with a bit of a questioning of your own journey, how you got to the work that you're doing now, your spiritual journey, if there is one kind of prominent in your story. Listeners will know that 5-6 years ago, I was calling myself an atheist, and here I am today, a self-proclaimed witch doing energy healing medicine. So
Yeah.
it's always curious to me what journey your path took you on to get you here.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful and also complex question.
Yes.
I was raised in a very religious, very conservative household. And so in that religion and in that household, I was taught that as a woman, my role and job as as a woman was going to be to stay at home and have babies. Was my whole role. And as a kid, that's what I loved and was excited about, and I was, the kid who would like eat too much and like push out her belly and pretend to be pregnant,
Yeah.
because that's what I was taught to want, and
Mhm.
I was very excited about it. And when I was 15 years old, I was diagnosed with a really rare genetic condition, essentially like meaning I would never be able to have children. And so
Mm.
that like rocked my world, because I was like, this is my role here. This is my divine purpose. This is why I
Right.
was put on this earth, was just to have babies. And all of a sudden, like, am I not worthy of that? Like, what? How? And it
Mm.
just really sent me on a spiral. And a lot of the people in my community didn't really know how to handle it. I think it rocked their world a lot too.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the beginning of a really dark time in my life that involved a lot of self-loathing and
Mm.
a lot of tears.
Yeah.
A lot of time by myself, just like trying to process through it. And I didn't know very much about spirituality. Even though I was raised in a religious household, I think there's a really big difference between religion and spirituality.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really raised in a spiritual household. It was very religious. And so I think my journey started with learning how to love myself. And the biggest thing happened for me when I was 19 years old. I left my house and I moved to Peru, and I served a mission for my church. And as part of this mission, I would get to know a lot of different people. And at one point, probably about a year or so in, so I had been living in Peru for a while. I felt really comfortable. I was really fluent in Spanish. And a guy just a few years older than me was telling me about how he just lost custody of his daughter, and he was heartbroken. He was devastated, and he was crying, and he was telling me all these things. And he looked up, there was a very specific moment where he looked up and our eyes met, and it's something that I can only describe as a soul connection. Like, I saw his soul, he saw mine, and I just knew that all of the pain and the isolation and everything that I had gone through up until that point was for that moment, right
Mm.
there in the middle of nowhere in Peru on the couch in this dark room. And it just, everything made sense for me. And that is when I started to realize that my journey was different than the one that I was told I was supposed to go on, but that was okay, that everybody's journey is supposed to be different.
Mm.
And so that started me on this path of learning how to love myself and learning how to find purpose and meaning in my life in a way that was different than I was told, like where I was told I was going to find purpose and meaning in my life,
Right.
if that makes sense. So that's kind of how my whole journey started.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that story. It's got all the elements of a good story. It's,
Mm.
that kind of dark night of the soul followed by this revelation of, oh, there is more here than the story I've been told. And
Yeah.
I think that there's so much value in a lot of organized religion. It gives a sense of community, a sense of structure and meaning,
Mhm.
but it can also be so rigid and
Mhm.
lacking that spiritual depth a little bit. And so I'm curious how you've woven the two together as you've moved forward from
Mhm.
that place.
Yeah, this is definitely a journey that I feel like I'm still on. I feel like I'm still trying to figure out exactly the place that both religion and spirituality fit in my life. I feel like religion provides a really good beginner structure. That's where I learned like how to meditate, I learned how to pray, I learned how to trust in a higher power and a divine being, but it only can take you so far before you have to start bringing the spirituality side into it, where you have to really understand your connection to the divine. You really have to understand what meditation looks like for you, because I fully believe that meditation looks different for everybody, that prayer
Mhm.
should look different for everybody. And so then it's like bringing your own personality and your own spirituality into that framework. I do
Mhm.
fully agree with you that the community that organized religion provides is really great a lot of times. They're really fantastic at being there for you, having these discussions, having kind of a safe place to find other people who are on a spiritual journey. But you do have to go beyond the confines of religion to really explore your own spirituality. So that's definitely where I am in the moment right now. Is I'm definitely working towards figuring out how so when I grew up really religious, and then I swung really far to the spiritual, and now I'm trying to bring it back to this beautiful place that really fills my soul.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a lovely way to describe it. As I mentioned, I was raised, well, I don't think I did mention, I was raised without religion. I grew up
Mhm.
as an agnostic atheist. And so I remember thinking as a kid more than once and throughout my early adult years as well, that while I didn't believe in like God the Father, because Christianity is the religion that comes to mind in this
Mhm.
part of the world, it is the dominant
Mhm.
religion. And I didn't
Mhm.
believe in that story, but I really envied the connection and the community and the faith
Mhm.
and the comfort that people got from that belief. So it's always
Mhm.
interesting. A lot of the people that I speak to on this podcast come from that religious background because,
Mhm.
again, prominent, prominent in our
Yeah.
society and our community. When it comes to the neuroscience side of things, how did that kind of enter into what you're doing or
Mhm.
your world, or how did you discover it?
I have always had a fascination with just understanding why people behave the way they do. It was kind of just like a hobby that I dabbled in. In high school, I took a psychology class. And when I went to college, I majored in international studies because I was really fascinated in different cultures and languages and just understanding the world a little bit better. But I had a lot of extra credits that I could take, and I took a bunch of psychology classes because
Mm.
found it so fascinating. When I ended up becoming a coach, I kind of became a coach by accident, is kind of what I joke. It found me, I didn't find coaching. It actually took me a really long time to embrace the fact that I was a coach. But when I started delving into that world a little bit more and really like pulling from my background in religion and like, okay, I know like this form of prayer, let's figure out like what that means to me and going through my own journey and kind of like understanding the mindset of things and how we can train our brains to help us and be more productive, or we can train them to like really hinder us. And I
Mhm.
really got into that side of things, and I became life purpose coaching certified. And just recently I found this applied neuroscience certificate that kind of blends all of my background in psychology with now my background in coaching, and it's kind of bringing it all together for me. So it's my latest obsession, and it's so fascinating to just understand how our brain works, because when we can understand the neuroscience behind what's happening, we can like lean into that more.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I used to think that it was like, oh, like the spiritual side of things and then the science side of things, and that they were really separate, but actually they all come together and
Yeah.
everything is connected. And it's so cool for me to be like, wow, like this is the science behind meditation. This is why that works. And it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I love this. My coaching certification is through the Center for Applied Neuroscience. And now I actually teach the program now as well. And so it was my first draw to the coaching world. I didn't actually even know what a coach was when I
Hmm.
signed up for the program. I just knew that I had a friend who was going through it and having like this personal development revelation. And I was seeking something. And so I signed up, and it has been so lovely as I simultaneously embarked on my kind of more spiritual journey as I trained to be
Hmm.
a healer, to have the neuroscience to back up the woo, as I just blanket
Hmm.
umbrella call it, because I've
Yeah.
always been very scientifically minded and curious and rational. And so to have that proof to make it feel like,
Hmm.
oh, I can talk about this other stuff. And if somebody comes at me and says that I've lost my marbles, I'm like, nope, because science.
Because look
Here
at
it
science.
is. We
Yeah.
have science. It's also interesting to me. There's so many mirrors in our interests and our backgrounds. You said you were in the international studies program because of the fascination with humans and cultures. And
Hmm.
I have a degree, my first degree is in religious studies for the
Oh,
same reason,
interesting.
because I was
Hmm.
so fascinated by different cultures and the impact that religion has through the years. Like every human society has religion.
Hmm.
And so I was like, there's something here. There's something tangible to the human
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to see where those, like that was 15, 18 years ago. I don't know. It's a while now, that first
Hmm.
degree. And I would have had no sense of this is where it was leading me, but it's always so
Hmm.
curious to see where that thread leads.
Yeah, absolutely. I really just think that everyone needs to approach their life with a little bit more curiosity and just be like, oh, like this is interesting. If I pull on this thread, like where are we going to end up? Because the more you do that, like you have no idea where it's going to lead you, and it's always way better than you could ever imagine.
And so how do you follow the curiosity? So what's coming to mind is that, sometimes it'll be like, "Ooh, what's that?" But it feels difficult to approach, maybe because it's outside of the box of the norm, or it feels
Mhm.
like, "I can't do that. That would be irresponsible." How do you support your clients in developing that curiosity and trust in their intuition?
Yeah, it's a big muscle that most of us have been trained to stop using.
Mhm.
And so it really just starts with like the smallest things, like just learning to recognize what it sounds like for you, learning to recognize what it feels like to be curious. I mean, I remember when I started this journey, there was a point where I was like, huh, like, I wonder when the last time is I just let myself like wonder about a question instead of just like going straight to my phone and looking it up, or just
Yeah.
like letting myself think. And like, what does it sound like when I just think by myself? I had no idea. And so a lot of the times it's just starting to feel it, to lean
Mhm.
into it and start to recognize it. And once we can start to recognize it and we can start to kind of name it and put a feeling to it, for me, it's like this really deep, like gut feeling. Like that's when I'm just like, I just know. And then
Mhm.
everything kind of lines up and it's really easy. It doesn't feel like a fight. And that's when I'm like, okay, this is where like my intuition's leading me. And it's really easy to follow. But before I had a name for it, I never recognized it in my life. But once I recognized it and put a name to it, instantly my brain could pick it out in all these instances where I
Mhm.
had that intuition and maybe I didn't follow it or maybe I did, and to see where it leads me. So I really think that's the first step.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my gosh, I'm jotting things down. I recently wrote an email and a post to my list about letting yourself wonder, not just
Mhm.
looking it up in your phone. It feels like a kindred connection here
Yes,
between our thought
absolutely.
processes. And
Yeah.
it is that first step, I would agree, is simply tuning into it and learning how to listen to
Mhm.
it, because
Mhm.
especially as women, and I don't know if most of your clients are women or not, mine are. And
Mhm. Same,
especially
yeah.
as women, we've been really conditioned not to listen to the intuition,
Mhm.
because the rational is so much more valued over the
Mm.
intuitive in our culture, that masculine
Yeah.
side of energies, and not
Yeah.
biologically speaking, but just the masculine feminine energies that exist in all of
Mhm.
us. It is still something that I struggle with, even though I can hear it, even though I
Mhm.
know that I'm supposed to trust it. It's
Mhm.
still something that, especially in the bigger stakes situations, is
Yeah.
really easy to subvert, or to say, well, no, that doesn't feel
Mhm.
rational. I'm going to do the rational thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have any tips for listeners, either from your own experience of following your intuition, even when it feels like it's the crazy thing to do, or from
Mhm.
experience helping clients, if there's anything really salient that comes through as a, I don't know, a how to.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that's just kinda, like, coming up for me is just recognizing that it's totally normal to question your intuition, especially as women, where everyone wants us to question everything, Maybe it's hormones, or maybe you ate something funny, or, just, like,
Mhm.
keep giving away your power. It's essentially what people want us to do, and so it's really normal for this to be hard, and it's really normal for us to fear it a little bit because we've been conditioned and taught to fear it. And so
Yeah.
just like not judging yourself when that comes up, it's okay for it to be scary.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's okay for you to say, I feel my intuition pulling me in this way. I am not ready to jump off that cliff yet. Like maybe I can edge up to it a little bit, or maybe I can ease myself into it.
Mhm.
The cool thing about our intuition is it is never going to go away. Here's a really good example in my own life. When I was first learning about coaching, I did not want to call myself a coach. I was really embarrassed to call myself a coach. And I was not sure I could lean into the woo, into the mindset, into the spiritual side of things, especially because it felt, I don't know, like my dad's a doctor. And so he's very like
Right.
science, very practical. And like I was always pushed to the science things away from the arts. Like it just felt too unstructured for me. And I felt like I wasn't ready for it. So what I did, but I still felt this calling to like help people. So I ended up going really heavy into like business coaching, and I was
Oh,
helping people with
interesting.
the structure of business because I love business. Business is so fascinating to me. And I ended up going really deep into the business structure, which got me to the point where I was comfortable saying, I am a business coach. But
Right.
that wasn't what my calling was. It
Yeah.
wasn't to like be a business coach. It really was to like lean into this mindset side of things. But I had to take a baby step in the right direction before I was able to fully trust my intuition and lean into the mindset side of things to get to where I am today, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So it's not going to go away. And it's not something that you have to feel so much pressure to like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable for me right now to like quit my job and, do whatever, You don't
Yeah.
have to do anything that drastic. Just start taking baby steps towards it to build that confidence. The other thing that came to mind and is like really calling at me to like really talk about right now is just to make sure you are writing down the experiences that you had when you followed your intuition and how it played out for you. Because
Mm.
our brains are the best search engine. I mean, like our brains are the best search engine in the entire world. And so if we are looking at taking a big decision, it's going to look at all of the reasons and we're like, it doesn't feel rational. It's going to look at all the irrational things we've ever done in our lives and it's going to say, yeah, you really shouldn't trust yourself. But if instead we say, okay, like I've had this feeling before, I recognize this as my intuition. What are all the other times in my life that I followed my intuition and it worked out well? What are those experiences? And then we can draw from that side of our experience instead of this like, oh, this is really unsure. Like, I don't know. That's really scary. Let's like not
Mhm.
touch that kind of side of our experience.
Mhm.
Did I explain that well? I know you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you did. That was a powerful it's a powerful tool and a powerful reminder because even as you were speaking, I was like, what are the times when I've just followed my intuition? And it's usually been,
Mhm.
I mean, not always, but it's often been those lower stakes situations. Like
Mhm.
nothing bad is likely to come of it if I just follow my intuition here, but really
Mhm.
compiling that like database of the
Mhm.
good that comes is so
Mhm.
important because as you mentioned, like our brains are wired to look for the danger and the fear,
Always.
right?
Yeah.
So when there is the unknown and the uncertain, that fear comes up, our brain's like, "Oh no. Let's keep you protected. Let's
Mhm.
keep you safe. That looks dangerous. We don't know what that
Right.
is going to result in. We know that doing this, well, we think we know. We don't actually, but our brain thinks it knows that continuing
Yeah.
on in the same is going to lead to a predictable, controllable outcome.
Mhm.
Um, so I love that reminder to write down the times you have followed it. A
Mhm.
time jumped into my mind about I grabbed a plane ticket to go to Austin for a weekend because it was on sale. And
Mhm.
everyone's like, why are you going? I'm like, I don't know, the ticket was on sale.
Yeah.
I'm going. And I had the most amazing weekend. I made a few really, really amazing friends. I got to eat great food and listen to some amazing music. And I never would
Mhm.
have had that beautiful experience, which was also in November of 2019. So, like, one of the last
Oh,
trips I
yeah.
took before
Mhm.
lockdown started, had I not just said, well, I have the time and the ability to do this and it's on sale, so we're going to go with it. And at that point in time, I wouldn't have called it my intuition. I'd have just called it
Mhm.
my spontaneity. But now,
Mhm.
knowing what I know, looking back, you've motivated me to go back and kind of like compile a list of all the different times I've listened to
Yeah.
that intuition. And I used to use it a lot in my career as a midwife.
Mhm.
That was a hard place to use it because you do
Mhm.
need to document all your decisions for like
Mhm.
medical
Mhm.
evidence. But
Yeah. Yeah,
but
sure.
yeah, I love both of those pieces that you described. The, starting small and the
Mhm.
fact that it will never go away. Like it popped
Mhm.
into my head that, that sometimes doors open and then they do close if we don't act on it. But the
Mhm.
intuition piece will live with us
Mhm.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really fully believe, like, even if doors close and we didn't take that opportunity, I really fully believe that our intuition is pulling us towards the best version of ourselves. And even if that door closed right now, you weren't ready to jump on that opportunity, the next doors that open, while they're going to be different, it's going to be a different experience, it's still pulling you towards that best version of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully concur. And I'm interested in, I guess the way that you weave this understanding and this knowledge, because you said you're a life purpose coach, and I know that you focus on self-love. And so I suspect that kind of sets the foundation for finding the purpose, is coming into that relationship with self first. How does intuition help in that search for self-love and search for life purpose?
Yeah. One of my favorite things about a coach is that I don't necessarily have to have all the answers because all of my clients have it within them. And so my biggest goal is just to help them learn how to tap into that intuition. And it's really hard to trust your intuition. Like I said, I feel like that intuition is pulling you to your higher purpose, your higher, sense of self. It's really hard to trust that intuition if it's coming from yourself and you don't love yourself. Like, when's the last time you ever took advice from someone you didn't love?
Yeah.
Never,
No.
And so it really I just feel like self-love is just like the basis. That's where we got to start. And then we got to start to really appreciate the divine within us and the ability that we have to tap into that divine, and the fact that we have a purpose and we have a higher calling, and like really trusting that. And then even if the path seems a little bit strange and you're like, why am I becoming a business coach? I don't know. But like, that's, it's bringing you to a better place. And so learning how to trust that process and then trust yourself as well.
That's a beautiful way to speak to it. And it is, again, this place that so many of us struggle with. We're often far kinder and ready to extend love and forgiveness and compassion to those around us than we are to ourselves, because a lot of us walk around with this unworthiness wound.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who is listening and like nodding along and being like, oh yeah, that this this feels like she's speaking to me, like I hear my intuition, I want to trust it, but I really can't, and I'm so hard on myself, and I know I shouldn't be, but it's still happening. Do you have any words of wisdom for the woman who might be feeling that way?
Yeah, I have an exercise for the woman who's feeling that way. It's really hard to do, but it makes such a big difference. Essentially, what you're going to do is every time you look in the mirror, or at least like start at once a day, you're going to put your hand on your heart. You're going to make eye contact with yourself, and you're just going to say, I love you. I trust you. I've got you. A lot of times, like, we have such this like fear of like being there for ourselves. We feel like, especially as women, I feel like we have this complex where we need to be serving other people. And how dare we think about ourselves, But a lot of times when we're feeling that, like if you're feeling pulled to this, you're like, wow, like I really need to follow my intuition. The first thing you need to do is teach yourself that you can trust yourself. And so being able to say that out loud, making eye contact with yourself, like you're going to start to believe it, like knowing like, hey, I got you. I trust you. I am here for you. You're going to hear it. You're going to see it. You're going to see that person saying it back to you. And then you're going to start to feel it. And it takes a while. It's so awkward at first. It takes a while for it to like really sink in. But the more you make a habit of saying that to yourself, the more you hear yourself say that to yourself, the more you will believe it. And the easier it'll be to trust yourself and then to be able to trust your intuition.
That's a beautiful practice. I love that. Yes, it's hard, but it's simple. It's so simple, which so many of the tools and practices that help us grow and help us come to that seat of our own power and into a sense of self, they are really simple, but they're hard to do. I think that's part of why working with a coach or somebody to be in your corner, to hold you through that hard, to cheer you on as you do it, to be like, yep, feels awkward and weird, to look at yourself in the eyes and tell yourself you love yourself. But mirror work is such a great tool for sure. So that feels like a really lovely little takeaway for anybody listening to practice, whether or not you feel like you have pretty decent self-love on board. I think that's a practice that all of us can be doing more of for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, even if it's something like you just how much do we need to hear just someone saying like, I love you, I got you, I trust you? We don't hear that enough. So even if we can just start to provide that more, like, and build that self-love we already have, that is such a beautiful practice to have.
And it gives you the foundation to hold yourself through so much as well, for sure.
Yeah.
So for anybody who's interested in working with you or having your support as they go down this self-love and intuitive decision-making journey, how do people find you? How do people work with you these days?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the middle of a really big rebrand. But that aside, if you search Austin and Monica pretty much anywhere, you will find me. So Austin and Monica on Instagram, hello at Austin and Monica is my email. AustinandMonica.com is my website. I currently have a podcast. It's called the Profitable Nomad Couple Podcast. It is pivoting. It will be changing. So that won't be the name forever. If you're listening to it within the next, I don't know, month or so, that's where you'll be able to find me.
Amazing. I love all of those offerings. And obviously, all of the links to work with Monica will be in the show notes to connect with her. That'll all be there. And if you have any questions for her, please reach out and find her because, yeah, this has been such a delightful conversation. And I can just tell that there's so much wisdom and light that you offer to the people who get to be in your sphere, in your circle, being supported by you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Is there anything else, any last thoughts or words that you'd like to leave the listeners with before I wrap us up?
Yeah, actually there's one last thing that just was kind of on my mind. I love to travel. I love understanding different cultures and people, and like just getting out of my element feels so good. And so I have been working to combine travel with this self-love idea, and I'm hosting a retreat in February, and I would love for any of your listeners to come join me. It's going to be in Cartagena, Colombia. It's kind of an adventure meets self-love retreat. So we're going to be kayaking and paddleboarding and snorkeling and going on city tours, but we're also going to be doing restorative yoga sessions and meditating together, and we have massages on the beach, and we have a private chef who's making really delicious, wholesome food. So I'm really excited about it. So if anybody just needs like a Kickstarter or just wants to get away and really like have a set time where they can focus on this with another group of people, definitely come join me. It's going to be so fun. It's happening February 2nd to the 6th.
Amazing. Oh, I love a good retreat. I think that they're so powerful as like a portal for change or for transformation. So that's great.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad you remembered to share that. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today with me. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you and getting to know you and seeing how many synchronicities. I also was super embarrassed to call myself a coach at first. I was like, I don't know if I can claim that title. How much of your story resonates with mine, despite very different backgrounds, which I think is just what we find the more we come together and converse in open vulnerability and in sisterhood, the more we realize that we are all way more similar than we are different. And from the self-love, we spread the love to each other as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for providing this space for people too. This is such a beautiful work that you're doing.
Thank you. And to all our listeners, as always, thank you for being here. If you liked this episode, please go ahead and leave a rating or review. It helps ever so much. Share the episode with your friends. Tag us on Instagram if you're sharing over on socials. And I will be back with you here next week. Bye for now.